The first thing she noticed was the quiet. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that settles after a long day, but a thin, fragile silence that followed her through the apartment like a shadow that knew her secrets. It lived in the corners of the rooms, in the pause between sounds, in the space where words should have been spoken but weren't. She stood in the hallway, keys still in her hand, listening. The clock in the living room ticked with a precision that felt almost accusatory. Tick, tick, tick. Each second marked not just time but distance. Distance between who she had been, who she was pretending to be, and who she feared she was becoming. She slipped off her shoes quietly, though no one had asked her to be quiet. He was in the bedroom, she knew, or maybe the study. He was often somewhere else these days, physically present, emotionally distant, like a man standing on the opposite shore of a river she didn't know how to cross anymore. Her name is Anna. She hadn't always been careful. In the beginning, carelessness had felt like freedom. The affair hadn't started with desire. That was the lie she told herself now, because desire was easier to condemn than loneliness. Desire could be blamed on impulse, on weakness. Loneliness, on the other hand, demanded explanations, accountability, history. It had started with conversations. A coffee after work that ran too long, a laugh that came too easily, someone who listened without already knowing her answers, someone who asked questions she hadn't been asked in years. Her husband, Michael, had never stopped listening, but he had stopped asking. Somewhere along the way, their marriage had become efficient, functional, safe. They talked about groceries, schedules, bills. They shared silence like furniture, familiar, unmoving, unquestioned. And then there was David. David noticed when she hesitated before speaking. He commented on the way she chose her words like they mattered. He remembered things, small things, things Michael used to remember once, a long time ago. Anna told herself it was harmless. That word became a refuge, harmless. Just coffee, just talking, just feeling seen. She crossed the living room now, fingertips brushing the back of the couch. The fabric still held Michael's shape from where he'd been sitting earlier. That simple indentation made her chest tighten. Guilt didn't arrive all at once. It never does. It creeps in quietly, disguised as justification. The first time she crossed the line, she didn't even know where the line had been. It blurred under her feet, erased by wine and shared vulnerability, and a moment of silence that felt too intimate to remain unbroken. Afterward, she cried alone in her car, gripping the steering wheel as if it could anchor her to reality. "I'm not this person," she whispered. And yet she didn't stop. Now, weeks later, guilt had become a background noise. Not loud enough to stop her, not quiet enough to ignore. It lived in her stomach, a constant low ache, flaring whenever Michael looked at her for just a second too long. She moved toward the kitchen, rehearsing her smile. "How was your day?" "Fine. Busy." Lies didn't always require invention. Sometimes they just required omission. Michael was sitting at the table when she entered, a mug of tea cooling in his hands. He looked up at her, his expression calm, unreadable. "Hey," he said. The word landed gently, too gently. "Hey," she replied, forcing warmth into her voice. She leaned down and kissed his cheek. It was automatic muscle memory, but she felt the difference immediately. The slight stiffness in his posture, the fraction of a second too late when he leaned into her touch. Or maybe she imagined it. That was the problem. Everything had become uncertain. Every glance, every pause, every sigh could be evidence or coincidence, and she didn't know which possibility terrified her more. She busied herself with the kettle, her back to him. "So," she said lightly, "anything interesting today?" He didn't answer right away. "No," he said finally, "not really." The silence returned, stretching between them. She wanted to fill it. She wanted to talk about her day, about work, about the story David had told her that made her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed in years. But she couldn't, because if she spoke too freely, she might reveal something she couldn't take back. Because part of her was afraid that Michael already knew and was waiting for her to confess. That night, lying beside him in bed, she stared at the ceiling while his breathing settled into a slow, even rhythm. The room was dark, but her mind was painfully bright. She replayed moments from the past weeks, scanning them for mistakes. Had she smiled too much at her phone? Had she stayed out too late? Had she changed, just enough to be noticeable? She remembered the way Michael had looked at her 2 nights ago, when she'd mentioned David's name casually over dinner. Just a flicker, a tightening of his jaw, gone before she could be sure it had been real. Fear bloomed then, sharp and cold. What would happen if he found out? She imagined the confrontation, the raised voice, the accusations, the tears, the shattering of the life they had built together piece by piece. But that wasn't the image that hurt the most. The worst image was Michael not yelling at all. Michael looking at her the way he looked at strangers. With distance. With quiet finality. She turned onto her side, watching the outline of his face in the darkness. I can fix this, she told herself. I'll end it, I'll focus on us, this doesn't have to mean anything. That promise became another lie she carried with her. The next day, she ended things with David. At least she tried. They sat across from each other in the cafe where it had all begun, the air thick with unspoken words. Her hands trembled around her cup. I can't do this anymore, she said. It's wrong. David studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I figured this was coming, he said quietly. You love him. She hesitated. Yes, she said, and hated herself for how easily the word came. David didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply reached across the table and squeezed her hand once, gently, as if letting go of something fragile. Take care of yourself, he said. Walking away felt like tearing off a bandage that had fused to her skin. Painful, necessary, incomplete. She expected relief. Instead, she felt hollow. At home that evening, Michael cooked dinner. He moved with practiced ease, sleeves rolled up, focused. She watched him from the doorway, struck by a sudden wave of nostalgia. This was the man she had married, steady, thoughtful, quietly kind. Shame washed over her. She helped set the table, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke of years spent together. They ate, talked about neutral things, the weather, a news story, a neighbor's dog. Normalcy reconstructed. And yet something had shifted. Michael watched her more closely now, not obviously, not suspiciously, just attentively, as if he were memorizing her. She caught him looking at her phone once when it buzzed on the counter. The message was from a coworker, harmless. Still, her heart raced. That night when he reached for her in bed, she froze. Just for a moment. Long enough for him to notice. Are you okay? He asked. Yes, she said too quickly, just tired. He pulled back, nodding. He didn't push. That restraint hurt more than insistence would have. As he turned away, Anna felt the full weight of what she had done settle onto her chest. She had broken something. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, carefully, almost politely. Days passed, then weeks. She tried to be better, kinder, more present. She listened when Michael spoke. She laughed at his jokes. She initiated conversations, touches, plans for the future. But effort could not erase truth. At night, she dreamed of confession. In her dreams, she told him everything, and he either forgave her instantly or walked away without a word. She never knew which ending scared her more. Michael never asked outright. That was the strangest part. No accusations, no questions, no searching through her phone, no sudden demands for reassurance. Just silence. a thoughtful, observant silence that felt heavier with each passing day. She began to wonder if he was punishing her by not punishing her at all. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the television murmuring in the background, Michael spoke without looking at her. "Do you believe people can make mistakes and still be good?" he asked. Her breath caught. "Yes," she said slowly. I think everyone makes mistakes. And can they come back from them?" She swallowed. "I hope so." He nodded, eyes still on the screen. "So do I." That night, Anna cried quietly into her pillow, careful not to wake him. For the first time, she understood something she had been avoiding. The affair hadn't just been a betrayal of her marriage. It had been a betrayal of herself. And whatever was coming next, whatever Michael was thinking, planning, or feeling, she knew one thing with chilling clarity. The life she had known was already gone. The consequences were simply waiting their turn. Michael had always believed that the worst pain would announce itself. That it would arrive loudly, through shouting, slammed doors, undeniable evidence placed directly in front of him. He had imagined betrayal as something dramatic, unmistakable, a wound that bled openly. He was wrong. The truth came to him the way fog creeps in over water, slow, almost gentle, until suddenly everything familiar is obscured. At first, it was nothing more than a feeling. A subtle shift in the air between them. A sense that Anna was standing half a step away from him even when she was right beside him. He noticed it during dinner conversations, during shared silences, during moments that should have felt intimate but didn't. She was still there, but not fully. Michael did not confront feelings immediately. He had learned long ago that emotions could lie, that instincts could be distorted by fear or insecurity. He trusted patterns, not impulses. And patterns slowly began to emerge. Anna smiled at her phone more often, not openly, never openly, but with a private softness that vanished the moment she realized he was watching. She started coming home later on certain days of the week, always with reasonable explanations. Work ran long, traffic was terrible, a colleague needed help. Nothing that could be challenged. Nothing that could be proven. So he said nothing. Silence had always been his refuge. As a child, silence had kept him safe. As an adult, it gave him clarity. While others reacted, he observed. While others spoke, he listened. He began to listen now, not just to what Anna said, but to what she didn't. She talked less about her feelings, less about her doubts, less about the small, mundane details of her day that used to fill the spaces between them. In their place came efficiency, politeness, care. Too much care. She touched him more deliberately, as if following instructions she'd memorized. Her laughter sounded rehearsed. Her affection had a carefulness to it, like someone handling something already cracked. At night, lying beside her, Michael stared into the darkness and let his thoughts move freely. If she were unhappy, would she tell me? If she were tempted, would she resist? If she had already crossed a line, would I want to know? He imagined asking her directly, "Are you seeing someone else?" In his mind, the question echoed, heavy and irreversible. Once spoken, it would fracture whatever remained between them, and he wasn't ready to break something he didn't yet understand. So instead, he watched. One evening, while Anna was in the shower, her phone lit up on the bedside table. A name appeared on the screen. David. The name meant nothing to him at first, just another syllable in a world full of them, but something in his chest tightened anyway. He didn't touch the phone. He didn't read the message. He didn't need to. The way Anna reacted when she returned to the bedroom told him everything. Her hand reached for the phone too quickly. Her shoulders tensed before she realized there was nothing to hide anymore. Michael pretended not to notice. Later that night, he lay awake long after her breathing deepened. His mind replayed the moment again and again, dissecting it. He felt no rage. Not yet. What he felt was something colder. A quiet understanding began to form, not as a conclusion, but as a possibility that refused to leave him alone. There is another man. Once the thought existed, it colored everything that followed. Her guilt became visible, not because she confessed, but because guilt has a rhythm. It stumbles, it overcompensates, it avoids direct eye contact during moments that demand honesty. Michael began to see how carefully she moved around him, like someone navigating a room full of fragile glass. And suddenly, the silence between them made sense. He thought back to their early years together. Anna had always been expressive. She talked with her hands, she argued passionately, she cried openly. Even in conflict, she had been present, fully, emotionally present. Now she was distant, in a way that felt intentional. Controlled. That hurt more than anger would have. It meant she was thinking about someone else. It meant her emotional energy, once freely given, was now rationed. Michael went through his days outwardly unchanged. He went to work. He met deadlines. He laughed at appropriate moments. He nodded when spoken to. Inside, something was breaking down methodically, piece by piece. At night, he revisited memories, searching for the moment things had begun to unravel. Had he missed something? Had he taken her for granted? Had he become too quiet, too predictable, too safe? The questions gnawed at him, but he refused to let them become self-pity. Blame was easy, understanding was harder. And understanding, he suspected, would hurt more. One afternoon, he left work early. He didn't tell Anna. Instead, he walked through the city with no destination in mind, letting his thoughts stretch out. He sat on a park bench and watched people pass, couples, parents with children, strangers brushing past one another without ever meeting again. He wondered how many of them were pretending, how many of them were holding onto secrets they didn't know how to carry. Michael realized then that what he feared most wasn't the affair itself. It was the possibility that Anna had already left him emotionally and simply hadn't bothered to say goodbye. That evening, over dinner, she laughed at something he said. The sound startled him. It was genuine. For a moment, hope flared in his chest, sharp and dangerous. Maybe I'm wrong, he thought. Maybe this is just a phase. Maybe we can still fix this. But hope, he had learned, could be cruel. Later that night, he asked her a question, not the one burning inside him, but one close enough to feel its heat. Are you happy? He asked. Anna looked at him, startled. Her eyes filled with something like fear. Yes, she said after a pause. I mean, I'm trying to be. Trying. The word echoed in his mind long after the conversation ended. Happiness shouldn't require effort that looked like restraint. That night, Michael made a decision. He would not beg. He would not accuse. And he would not compete with a ghost he couldn't see. If Anna had chosen someone else, if she had already rewritten the terms of their marriage, then he would face that truth with dignity. But first, he needed certainty. Not evidence. Understanding. Over the following days, he paid attention in ways that felt almost intimate. He noticed how Anna spoke David's name casually, as if stripping it of importance. How she avoided talking about certain hours of her day. How she flinched, just slightly, when he mentioned trust or loyalty in abstract conversations. And then came the moment that erased all doubt. They were sitting together on the couch, the television flickering quietly. Anna's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She didn't look at it. That alone was unusual. The screen lit up. A message preview appeared. I miss you. Michael felt something settle inside him then. Not pain. Not shock. Acceptance. He didn't reach for the phone. He didn't say a word. He simply leaned back and stared at the ceiling, letting the truth anchor itself fully in his mind. The affair was real. The betrayal was real. And strangely, once the truth was undeniable, the chaos inside him began to quiet. In its place came focus. Michael realized something important in that moment. He could confront her. He could expose everything, demand explanations, cry, rage, plead. Or he could step back, observe, choose himself. That night, while Anna slept beside him, unaware that her secret was no longer a secret, Michael made another decision, one that would define everything that followed. He would not allow betrayal to turn him into someone smaller. If this marriage was ending, it would end on his terms. Not through cruelty, not through revenge born of rage, but through something far more powerful: control. And as he lay there in the dark, listening to her steady breathing, a single thought formed with quiet certainty. She thinks I don't know. And that will be my advantage. Once Michael accepted the truth, everything slowed down. Pain, when acknowledged, no longer needed to scream. It settled into something dense and heavy, like stone beneath the surface of water. He carried it with him through his days, not as a wound, but as a weight, something to be measured, accounted for, used. He did not change overnight. That was deliberate. Sudden transformations invite questions. They expose intention. Michael wanted none of that. He wanted Anna comfortable, unaware, certain that whatever tension existed between them was fading, not deepening. So he became softer. He listened more. He smiled when she spoke. He asked about her day with genuine interest, not because he cared about the details, but because he cared about consistency, about maintaining the version of himself she believed she knew. And Anna responded. She relaxed. He noticed it in the way her shoulders dropped when she came home, in the way she laughed more freely again, in the way she reached for his hand in public as if reaffirming something to herself. Guilt, he realized, needed reassurance. And reassurance, when offered strategically, could become leverage. Michael did not spy on her. He did not read her messages or track her movements. He had learned what he needed to know. Anything more would only poison him with unnecessary detail. Instead, he turned inward. For the first time in years, he began to wake before dawn. At first, Anna didn't notice. He slipped out of bed quietly, dressed in the dark, and went for long walks while the city slept. The air was cold, sharp enough to clear his thoughts. With every step, he felt himself reclaiming something he hadn't realized he'd lost. Discipline. He started running, slowly at first, then with growing intensity. The rhythm of his breath, the steady burn in his muscles, pain with purpose, pain he controlled. He joined a gym. He hired a trainer. He committed fully, not out of vanity but out of need. His body became a project, a structure, something solid he could build while everything else felt uncertain. Anna noticed the changes eventually. "You're up early these days," she said one morning, watching him tie his shoes. "Just trying to take better care of myself," he replied. It wasn't a lie. He cut back on distractions. Social media, idle conversations, empty entertainment. In their place came books, psychology, philosophy, biographies of people who had rebuilt themselves after collapse. One idea surfaced again and again. The most powerful response to betrayal is independence. Not indifference. Not cruelty. Freedom. At work, Michael took risks he'd been avoiding for years. He pitched ideas, took on projects, spoke with a confidence that surprised even him. When an opportunity for advancement appeared, one that would require travel, visibility, leadership, he accepted without hesitation. Success, he discovered, was intoxicating in a quiet way. It filled spaces that grief had hollowed out. Anna watched all of this with a mixture of pride and unease. "You seem different," she said one evening. "Different how?" "More focused, more alive." He smiled. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," she said quickly. "It's just unexpected." Unexpected, Michael thought, was the most honest word she'd used in weeks. As he grew more self-contained, Anna grew more anxious. She tried to reconnect, suggesting date nights, weekend trips, conversations about the future. She spoke about renovations they could make to the apartment, about vacations they should plan next year. Michael listened. He nodded. He never fully committed. Distance, he learned, could be created without absence. It was built through subtle refusals, through availability without vulnerability. He stopped sharing his inner world with her. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. That space once shared was now his alone. And in that space, an idea began to take shape. Michael did not want to humiliate Anna. He did not want to expose her publicly or destroy her reputation. Those were the weapons of anger, not resolution. What he wanted was balance. He wanted her to understand, fully and irrevocably, what she had lost. An understanding, he believed, came not from accusation but from contrast. He decided then that he would leave. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but conclusively. He began preparing quietly. He met with a lawyer, presenting his situation calmly, factually. No theatrics, no blame, just reality. "I want this to be clean," he said, "respectful." The lawyer nodded, impressed by his composure. At home, Michael continued playing his role. He celebrated Anna's birthday with thoughtfulness. He remembered details. He was kind. Kindness, he realized, was disarming. It made guilt unbearable. Anna began to pull away from David. Not because she had fallen back in love with Michael, but because the affair no longer offered escape. It no longer felt thrilling. It felt heavy, inadequate. Michael noticed the shift. He did not acknowledge it. Instead, he focused on the final element of his plan. The gesture, the act that would say everything without a single accusation. He waited for the right moment. That moment came on an ordinary evening. They were sitting across from each other at dinner, the table set carefully, candles lit. Anna had cooked. She was nervous. He could see it in the way she avoided his eyes. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us." He looked at her attentively. "I think we should talk," she continued. "Really talk about where we're going." Michael set down his fork. "I agree," he said calmly. Relief flickered across her face. He reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table between them. Her breath caught. "What's that?" she asked. "Something I've been working on," he said. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were documents, neatly organized, divorce papers. Not unsigned drafts. Finalized. Anna stared at them, her hands trembling. You knew," she whispered. Michael met her gaze, his expression gentle, composed. "Yes." The word landed softly, but its impact was devastating. "How long?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Long enough," he replied. She broke then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like something collapsing inward. "I was going to end it," she said. "I already did, I swear." "I believe you," Michael said. That was the cruelest kindness of all. "Then why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" Michael leaned back slightly, his voice steady. "Because love isn't just about staying," he said. "It's about choosing, and you chose something else long before I placed those papers on the table." Silence enveloped them. "I'm not angry," he continued, "and I don't hate you, but I won't remain where I'm no longer respected." Anna covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Michael watched her with a sadness that was clean, uncomplicated. This was not revenge. This was alignment. He stood, walked to the door, and paused. "I'll be staying somewhere else for a while," he said. "Take the time you need." As he closed the door behind him, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in months. Lightness. Not triumph. Not relief. Freedom. The apartment felt unfamiliar without Michael. Anna noticed it immediately, not as absence but as imbalance. The rooms were the same size, the furniture unchanged, the light falling through the windows in its usual patterns. And yet, something essential had been removed, like a load-bearing wall she hadn't known existed until the structure began to strain. She sat at the kitchen table long after the door had closed behind him, the divorce papers spread out before her like an accusation that didn't need words. Her hands hovered over the pages, unable to touch them again. She had imagined many versions of this moment. Screaming. Blame. Tears shared in mutual collapse. What she hadn't imagined was calm. Michael's calm. It replayed in her mind with merciless clarity, the steadiness of his voice, the gentleness of his eyes, the way he had said yes when she asked if he knew. As if knowledge itself were not a weapon but a settled fact. That calm hurt more than rage ever could. In the days that followed, Anna tried to function. She went to work. She answered emails. She smiled when spoken to, but beneath the surface everything was unraveling. David called. Once. Twice. Then again. She didn't answer. The affair had lost its meaning. Without secrecy, without the illusion of escape, it felt small, insufficient, a poor trade for what she had lost. When she finally met David to tell him it was over, truly over, she realized she was speaking from a place of emptiness, not resolution. "I destroyed my marriage," she said flatly. David looked at her with concern, but also distance. "I never asked you to do that," he said. She nodded. "I know." And for the first time, she understood something clearly. Responsibility could not be shared. She went home alone that evening. Meanwhile, Michael moved through his new life with deliberate grace. He rented a modest apartment across the city, nothing extravagant, nothing temporary. It was a space chosen not for comfort but for clarity, clean lines, neutral colors, open windows. A place where the air moved freely. He kept his routines, early mornings, training, work. The discipline he had built during the months of quiet preparation now supported him effortlessly. When colleagues congratulated him on his recent success, on the promotion, on the visibility, on the opportunities opening before him, he accepted their praise without deflection. He had earned this. But what surprised him most was not the absence of pain. It was the absence of bitterness. He thought often about Anna, not with longing, not with resentment, but with a kind of distant compassion. She had not set out to destroy him. She had simply chosen herself without understanding the cost. And now so had he. Weeks passed. The legal process unfolded smoothly. Michael had anticipated complications, emotional negotiations, attempts to revisit the past. None came. Anna signed everything. She did not fight. That in itself felt like an acknowledgement. They met once more by necessity, not desire, to finalize the last details. They sat across from each other in a neutral office, the air conditioned to a sterile chill. Anna looked smaller than he remembered. "I didn't think you would leave like this," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the table. "Like what?" Michael asked. "Without trying to punish me." Michael considered the question. "I didn't leave to teach you a lesson," he said. "I left because staying would have taught me the wrong one." She nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "I lost you," she whispered. Michael didn't correct her. Loss, he had learned, needed no commentary. The final papers were signed. And just like that, the marriage that had once defined both of them was reduced to ink and signatures and polite handshakes. Anna walked out of the building alone. Michael stepped into the sunlight and felt its warmth on his face. That was when the final act of his revenge, if it could even be called that, fully revealed itself. He did not disappear. He did not withdraw from the world they had once shared. He flourished within it. Months later, Michael hosted a small gathering to celebrate a major professional milestone. Friends, colleagues, familiar faces from different chapters of his life filled the space. Laughter moved easily through the room. Music played softly in the background. Anna hadn't been invited, but she heard about it anyway. She saw the photos online. Michael standing confidently, relaxed, surrounded by people who admired him. Not the quiet, reserved man she had once taken for granted, but someone visibly at ease with himself. Someone complete. The realization struck her slowly, painfully. Michael had not rebuilt himself to prove a point. He had rebuilt himself without her. That was the cruelty. That was the beauty. She began to understand what his silence had meant all along. He had not been waiting for her to choose him. He had been choosing himself. One evening, months after the divorce was finalized, Anna walked past a cafe and saw Michael inside. He was sitting by the window, speaking to a woman she didn't recognize. They were laughing, not nervously, not carefully, but with the ease of two people unburdened by secrets. Michael looked different. Not just stronger. Not just more confident. Free. Anna stood outside for a moment unseen, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. She felt no anger then, no jealousy. Only understanding. She turned away and kept walking. Michael never saw her. And that, too, was part of it. Later that night, Michael returned to his apartment and stood by the open window, the city spread out before him in quiet motion. He thought briefly of the past, not with regret, but with acceptance. Pain had taught him something invaluable. That dignity was not preserved through endurance. That love without respect was not love. That revenge, when stripped of cruelty, could become something else entirely. A reclamation. He poured himself a glass of water, turned off the lights, and sat in the silence. But this silence was different. It was not heavy, not fragile, not filled with unspoken truths. It was earned, and in it Michael felt whole.